Mic check, mic check. How do we sound? How do we sound, guys? Welcome, everybody. But yeah, like I said, please be sensitive for AOC. She might be crying in private about this, about what we're going to talk about here today. But truly, for me, at least, like in all honesty, it is really sad. Just like some of the things that I showed in my last stream, like the people discussing about how they have to choose between their livelihood and getting the jab with, getting fired. That really was got me almost in tears. It was hard to watch those videos. And same thing with the people at the border, the Haitian refugees. Atris, we're here for reasons known and unknown. Monarch, hey, why isn't AOC crying about this? I mean, she's a careerist. It's all an act, right? She was crying in front at the border, like when Trump was president. Remember, there's that picture of her going like. Let's see, are we live on Rockfin? Yeah, we're live on Rockfin. What's up, CJ? So what's up with 80% fully vaccinated Singapore? Singapore reports highest single day rise in COVID-19 cases. I got to check that out. I haven't really looked into Singapore and how they're handling the situation. SSJ4 Curtis, what's up, man? Shout out to you. You've been around for a long time. I've seen you back in the big talk, little talk days when I would be on there as a guest for those live streams. Tony watches closely. What's up, brother? Propaganda, I love you too, man. Jack Sith, what's up, brother? Delbert Sefton, what's up? It's great to see all of you here tuning in. We'll get started in just a minute here. Let's wait for a few more people to trickle in, right? Your boy spitting. You said you got a notification for a change. It was so weird today. I went on another computer, right, where I work, and I tried to look up my channel in a video, and I couldn't find it until like the third page. Then earlier, like I was trying to prepare for this show, and I was trying to look up an interview that Nico House had about the Haitian president and when he got assassinated, and I couldn't find it until like the fifth page. It's so ridiculous. But let me know, guys, if you have the notification bell on. Do you guys get notifications when I go live? If not, I do know that the Discord notifications do work for people who have their notifications on Discord. We have it so that the bot lets people know whenever I go live. Just Amanda said, thank you for leading me here. Tony watches closely. Thank you very much, Tony watches closely, for letting people know. I do talk about the mandates and the vaccines and all that. More so, I discussed that on Rockfin exclusive videos, since YouTube is trying to censor people who talk about it. But recently, I've been noticing more people coming out and discussing this, like Jimmy Dore. Kim Iverson is talking about it even more now on the Hill. People are starting to wake up. And also, unfortunately, some people are doubling down. But those people that are doubling down saying, no, this is what we need, they're starting to lose some viewership. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. What's up? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. We will begin today's live stream by talking about Haitian refugees at the U.S. border. And I just want to start off by saying that the Biden administration gave the okay to do this. In order to understand why is this happening, we have to get at the root of the problem, right? We should always get at the root of the problem for anything if we want to truly fix it. And if we don't do that, then the problem will not be fixed, and we're just putting a band-aid on a broken bone or something that needs serious surgery. Saying that we need more border patrol is putting a bigger band-aid as opposed to getting at the root of the problem, which is US imperialism. Like, that's the root of the problem that requires some surgery. Saying that we need more border patrol, that's just putting a bigger band-aid on the situation. That's not actually going to fix your problem. So I just want to get that out of the way first. Get that out of the way first. So I want to share here what exactly is happening. So AJ Plus made a tweet the other day writing that the U.S. removed over 6,000 Haitian asylum seekers from the border at Del Rio. It is planning 6 deportation flights on Tuesday, denying many their legal right to asylum using Trump-era policy. A man at the border with 2 children said the U.S. government has no conscience. Absolutely. Look at these people suffering here. These people are starving. They're trying to seek sanctuary. Where they're coming from is dangerous. They have a high likelihood of dying, and they're willing to take the risk here based off of what they hear about the U.S., thinking that it's the land of opportunity. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, says it is investigating images of Border Patrol attacking asylum seekers with whips. They knew about this. Biden, Kamala, you think that they didn't know about this? And this would have happened under Trump's administration too. It's just no difference here. Absolutely no difference. It's a two-party illusion. Some were attacked while bringing food/water to Haitians trapped at the border in 104 degree Fahrenheit heat. One man said this treatment they are giving is racism because of the color of our skin. I mean, you can make that argument. Like, they're like Europeans, they don't have to necessarily cross a border to get here, but they come here through planes and stuff, and they have an easier time of adjusting here in the U.S. than people in the global South who are black and brown. Many being deported to Haiti have not been back in years and are returning amid political crisis. Earthquake destruction and gang violence that has displaced thousands. A man who fled after the 2010 quake, deported back with his wife and son, said there's no security in Haiti. And just a reminder about the earthquake in Haiti. Remember when all of a sudden back then, all these celebrities started caring about Haiti? And I think some of them genuinely do care about Haiti. But we have to see, are they talking about the situation here? Like, I could be wrong about some of them, but remember this right here? Remember when all these celebrities got together for a remake of We Are the World? This is We Are the World 25 for Haiti, when they had the 25th anniversary for that song. And then all these artists got together. You guys remember this, right? Look at all their signatures here. Oh my God, they're collaborating, spreading awareness about what's happening in Haiti. When this right here is... it's not getting at the root of the problem here. It's putting a band-aid on it, charity. And then there's these middlemen that make more money they take advantage of these situations, and they make money off of this stuff. You want to fix the problem? Then why don't you expose the system that we have, that which Hillary Clinton was a part of, right? Why don't you expose that system? U.S. imperialism. Why don't you expose that? I haven't seen any of these artists here talk about U.S. imperialism. I could be wrong. Have any of these artists talked about U.S. imperialism? Here we have Enrique Iglesias, Miley Cyrus, Jamie Foxx was here, Wyclef Jean, who is Haitian himself. I could be wrong. Has he talked about U.S. imperialism? All right, there's going to be ads here. In the middle of a song, you're going to play an ad? My goodness. Why don't they talk about the legislation that's written by the lobbyists? Why don't they talk about disaster capitalism? How these oligarchs, these multinationals take advantage of countries like Haiti for their resources. There's no talk about that. There's no talk about how they were, in that interview that I had with Alex Rubinstein, how Haitians were targeted and being blamed for HIV spreading across the world. So yeah, this thread goes on to say, the UN condemned the US for deporting hundreds of Haitian asylum seekers without hearings. We are disturbed. The US plans 6 daily deportation flights to Haiti starting Tuesday. Only some families and unaccompanied children are allowed to wait for hearings. President Biden is using Title 42 to expel asylum seekers without their right to hearings. Without their right to hearings. Just want to reiterate that. Ex-President Trump invoked Title 42 citing COVID-19, but health experts say it has no medical basis. Per CNBC, it was used to expel 440,000 plus people under Trump in his entire presidency. And Joe Biden, who hasn't even been in for a year, 690,000 plus people under Biden. People were shaming us into voting for Biden. Say, think about the kids in the cages. Think about all the immigrants. Look at how Trump is so racist towards these immigrants. Look, Trump wants to build a wall. Things are objectively worse now at the border under Joe Biden and how he's handling the situation. This is what the two-party illusion is. And no, your problems are not going to get fixed under a Republican either. So this goes on to say about 300 asylum seekers slept on the ground on the Mexico side of the border, some due to no food at Del Rio. Others fear the U.S. will deport them without asylum processing, though Mexico is also making arrests. It's not just the U.S. here, but apparently Mexico, which in an article that we're going to read, it appears like if they don't comply with what the U.S. wants, which is making arrests, then they will be sanctioned. It would be better for us to get killed than to get deported, is what these people said. I mean, them going back to the situation in Haiti is just going to prolong their suffering. But I just want to point out some tweets here by people. Nico House, his Twitter name is Joe Biden hates black people. I mean, it's true. And he says, given the treatment of the Haitian refugees at the border seeking a new life after U.S. imperialism ravaged their nation, I feel like this is a good time to remind people Joe Biden still hates black people. At Mo's frame, or aka Mo, said, this is what the lesser of two evils looks like. This looks like something you'd see in a textbook. It's like when the colonizers came and they brought their horses, when they were massacring Native Americans, also when they were trying to capture slaves who were trying to run away. Right? This is what you'd see. This is what you'd hear about our history, and it's just continuing. Again, we gotta, going at the root of this is looking at our foreign policy, U.S. imperialism, and trying to fix that, and understanding that the only way this problem will be fixed is if we dismantle the ruling predator class. Because they may introduce some policy that's still written and approved by the lobbyists that won't actually fix our problems. And it may appear like it's progressive on the surface. And I just want to point out here, and this is a point that I saw that Nick of aka Socialist MMA made, is that liberals, they turn off their activism when a Democrat becomes president. They're absolutely silent right now. All these people that were telling us to vote for Joe Biden, All these like longtime Democrats, like they will vote for Democrat no matter what, every election. That's the only time they're politically active, is every 4 years, or when the Republican is president and the mainstream news is talking about Black Lives Mattering. And then they put Black Lives Matter on their side, and then next to that they put a Biden Harris sign. And you see that all over here, especially where I live, in a really neoliberal place like the DMV. The Democrats, much like the Republicans, they exacerbate the problem because they're both owned by the same people. So until you raise the consciousness of these people that are always voting for a Democrat or always voting for a Republican, it's just, the problem is just going to keep exacerbating. You need to let them know that the solution isn't in continually voting for the lesser of two evil, because that lesser of two evil is just going to make things worse. It's just going to continue what the previous evil did. The solution is, what you got to let them know, is in community organizing, opting out of the system, and direct action. It's not in electoral politics. It's not. They're not facing the heat. Once you vote for these people, you've already given your leverage away. You've given them what they wanted by voting for them. And for specifics on solutions, like how exactly are we going to opt out of the system? How exactly are we going to organize with our communities? Stick around to the end, to the later part of this live stream. We will have a call-in show and talk to some of the audience members about solutions. We do that every Thursday. So I just want to remind people about Haiti's president, the one that got assassinated earlier this year, how he used to do favors for the U.S. For specifics on all that and U.S.'s involvement in Haiti, go to WikiLeaks. Go to WikiLeaks and look up Haiti on their search engine. You will find a lot of information about that. Their president also had, like I said earlier, he had a mysterious assassination earlier this year that involved some Colombians. There's an interview that Nico House had on his channel about it with Steve Poikonen of Slow News Day. The Convo Couch also had a great video with that introduced this topic for people who don't really understand much about the region of Haiti or keep up with Haitian politics. The Gray Zone also discussed this in depth. And I want to give a shout out to Ramiro Sebastian Funes, who also discussed this issue, and his channel, again, Ramiro Sebastian Funes. He talks about U.S. imperialism a lot on his talk show with guests. It's really informative. And if there's anyone else that I'm missing out there, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat if you guys learned a lot from other people about Haiti's, what's happening in Haiti throughout all these years and how it led up to what's happening now. We're also going to go over a Black Agenda Report article. But Haitians, they really don't like the Clintons. Like they are aware about the Clintons and what they've done to their country. A lot of Haitian Americans who fled their country to come here, they hate the Clintons. They know what they did and how they take advantage of disasters to enrich themselves. This is what the Clintons did in Haiti. Is a textbook example of Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. Right, there's a disaster that happens, an earthquake or a hurricane, and then there's markets that go out of business there in Haiti, like where people can buy food, and then the Clinton Foundation installs their little market there for people to buy food, and then it puts the previous businesses, the Haitian businesses, out of business, and then they increase the price, the Clintons. That's just like one example of some of the horrible things that they do over at Haiti. Again, for more information on that, you can go on WikiLeaks and look up Haiti, and you'll find a lot about this. The Clintons are deeply involved in how they ruined that country. But like I said, this is a textbook example of Naomi Klein's shock doctrine, taking advantage of disasters to advance capitalism. Disaster capitalism, that is. This disaster capitalism helps make the ruling predator class become more powerful. And I don't want to not mention Kamala Harris in this segment here. Kamala Harris, that's telling refugees to not come here. Earlier this year, she was saying that to the Central Americans and South Americans. She's saying, don't come here. Don't come here. instead of actually fixing the problem by dismantling the ruling class, which she's not going to do. She's not going to expose the system because she's profiting off of this system, and she's a careerist. She's in their pockets. I mean, she listens to her lobbyists, and it's disgusting to see with her herself being of Caribbean descent. I mean, her father is Jamaican. So like I said, I'm going to finish off with an article here by, before I even get to that, I wanted to point this out here. This tweet by Kobe. He said, a Haitian asylum seeker recently sent back by the U.S. says that him and others were chained together on their flight back, then unchained before onboarding so that journalists wouldn't be seen. I mean, this man right here is telling his story about what happened. So they chained us like animals. They claimed our hands, feet, and waist. They chained our hands, feet, and waist. Once we arrived, they made us stay inside the plane until they unchained us so that the journalists don't see what they did. Absolutely disgusting. They chained our hands, our feet, our waist. We were completely chained up. Our hands, feet, and waist chained. They chained us with chains. It's horrifying. I mean, they're treating them like prisoners rather than them being victims. Victims who are just trying to seek a better life. So I saw Jean-Luc Baraka share this article here, and I wanted to read a little bit. This is on Black Agenda Report, Borders, Blackness, and Empire by Jemima Pierre. So it says here, it took 2 days. It took 2 days for the United States government to deport more than 6,000 asylum seekers to Haiti. Almost 15,000 people, all presumably Haitian, have been encamped on the banks of the Rio Grande River between Del Rio, Texas, and Ciudad Acuña, Mexico. On September 18th, the mainstream media of the U.S. proclaimed a border crisis with Haitian migrants flooding the border. By September 20th, the Biden administration moved to get rid of them, deploying hundreds of Homeland Security agents supported by both the U.S. Coast Guard and the Department of Defense. This may be, commented Jamaican newspaper The Gleaner, one of the swiftest large-scale expulsions of migrants and refugees from the United States in decades. They're quick. They move quick to send them back to their country instead of actually fixing the problem. They should be giving the Haitians money and staying out of their politics and stop installing puppet leaders. Stop taking advantage of them to try to profit off of their resources. So it says here, driving this rapid, unprecedented action is not just a prototypical anxiety concerning immigrant hordes invading Texas. It is also a fear of the dark and looming specter of black people flooding across the border, sullying or contaminating the nation. Haitians represent the blackness of blackness, the primitive placeholders for the primordial threat to white supremacy. The dehumanizing images of Haitian migrants being whipped by U.S. Border Patrol agents appears to affirm this perception of blackness, while sparking a universal moral outrage among many progressives who otherwise pay little attention to Haitian politics and U.S. policies. Of course, fear trumps fact. We do not even know if all the black asylum seekers at the border are from Haiti. It has been reported over and over again that black migrants are coming from across South and Central America, from Brazil, Venezuela, Honduras, Nicaragua, as well as from the African continent itself. But the blackness of Haiti, or Haiti as representing a particular kind of blackness, terrifies a white supremacist state. This latest racist treatment of Haitian people by the U.S. deserves our absolute condemnation, and it is important to acknowledge how immigration impacts black populations in ways that are distinct from other migrants. But we also have to place this wave of migration to the U.S.-Mexico border within the broader context of U.S. and Western imperialism in the region. To not do so is to continue to exceptionalize Haiti and Haitian people in ways that hide their connections to the rest of the Western occupied world. and draw attention to the mere representation of Haitians rather than structural and historical causes of Haitian migration. The 15,000 asylum seekers at the Del Rio border did not emerge from nowhere. I mean, let's consider that like the history here of why they got here, right? It is a flare up of what has been happening to Haiti, African, and Central and South American asylum seekers for years. Thousands of Haitian, African, and Central American migrants have been stuck in Mexico for months and sometimes years. Like we just talked about how there was a family there that was there since the 2010 earthquake. Probably got their home destroyed. They have no future in their country. They're just waiting to die. Their kids are going to die of starvation. Meanwhile, the US is taking advantage of that disaster, doing videos like this, showing that, but then we don't see the problem that actually get fixed because we don't do anything about US imperialism. These celebrities don't do anything about US imperialism. There are two key reasons why the population of both black and brown asylum seekers have increased exponentially at the US-Mexico border. The first and most immediate reason is US domestic policies that have closed down the US as a haven for asylum seekers. In early 2019, the Trump administration implemented the Remain in Mexico program. That program which is being continued under Joe Biden, right guys? The program forces asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their claims are being processed in US immigration courts. This process can take years. By the end of 2019, for example, there were 56,000 asylum seekers, including 16,000 children. Think about the children, people, like the children in cages, the children that are at the border, like how AOC was exclaiming. Meanwhile, she's not doing anything to criticize Joe Biden. Instead, she's now calling those influx facilities, right? I haven't seen, guys, I haven't really been paying attention much to Twitter. Has AOC made any tweets about this? I mean, why do I even ask at this point, right? But yeah, waiting to be processed in Mexico. Adding to the delays, the U.S. uses a metering system by which U.S. border patrols limit the number of individuals allowed to seek asylum each day at ports of entry. Metering began under Obama in early February 2016. It was an effective tactic of what activists call asylum turnbacks. It must be pointed out, and I want to get this paragraph here across to you people. It must be pointed out that the U.S. could not enforce these draconian measures without the complicity of the Mexican government. They couldn't do this without the complicity of the Mexican government. With the Remain in Mexico policy, Trump threatened the leftist administration of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, with sanctions if it did not comply. Like I mentioned earlier, right? If Mexico doesn't do this, if they don't comply with the U.S., then they're gonna have to face sanctions, and their people will suffer. It's absolutely evil, what our country does. I mean, I think as citizens, we all have a responsibility to organize direct action events, to spread awareness about what we're doing here, right, guys? Otherwise, the U.S. is going to keep threatening other countries to comply with them. Obrador has done much more than comply. He has deployed the Mexican National Guard and military to the country's northern and southern borders, where they have brutally attacked and disbanded migrant caravans. That's really sad to hear that, Mexico is also a part of this torturing of these Haitian refugees who, otherwise if they had stayed in their country would have also been suffering, probably would have died earlier, considering the situation in their country and how hard it is to be fed. So just this last part here. Trump not only expanded but perfected policies begun under Obama. Toward the end of his term in March 2020, Trump advisors found an obscure legal provision that allowed the administration to use COVID-19 as a way to circumvent international law protecting refugees. This was the infamous Title 42 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Title 42 authorized the Center for Disease Control, aka the CDC, to issue statutes bearing entry to the U.S. to persons from countries who are suspected of carrying communicable disease. So you see how the COVID narrative, which I know like Tony watches closely, and other people who keep up with me on Rockfin are very invested in that, in the debunking of that case by watching The Last American Vagabond or watching Whitney Webb. And now, thankfully, Jimmy Dore is talking about this. You know, many of you guys are fans of Jimmy Dore. You see how the COVID narrative and taking advantage of what's going on here and implementing mandates to take away our civil liberties, how it's also tied to foreign policy and to cause more suffering on people in the global south. You guys see that? All these issues are connected to each other. The CDC listed Haiti as high risk for COVID-19 despite the relatively low infection rates. They have low infection rates in Haiti. But we have this assumption that just because there's people from a poor black country that the infection rates will be high. I mean, that's not what the evidence says. But we have this assumption because of how the mainstream media portrays these poor black countries. Did you know that the COVID cases are low in Africa as well? This is what they did with Anthony Fauci leading the charge. You know, and I discussed this with Alex Rubinstein when I had him on the show a couple months ago. This is what happened with the AIDS epidemic. They were blaming Haitians, and this article points it out as well. But as such, a designation only follows the CDC's naming of Haitians as exceptional carriers of HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. No matter the rate of Haitian infection, such a designation allowed Trump, and now Biden, to expel migrants without due process. Recently, a judge blocked Biden's use of Title 42. His administration has appealed. So I'm going to leave that for you guys to read further on. Absolutely devastating, this whole thing. But you guys see, right, that all these issues, the COVID narrative, our foreign policy, it's all connected. The way that they oppress us here at home and take away our civil liberties, how they keep whistleblowers in jail, whistleblowers like Daniel Hale and Julian Assange. They keep political prisoners like Mumia Abu-Jamal, who advocate for black issues. All these issues are connected. The censoring of alternative media. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. We'll move on here to the next topic. Thank you guys so much for watching and stay informed. And now we're going to move on to the next segment here. Let's see. What do you got here? Deep Moody Purple Blues. They can make bullshit laws in violation of human rights and enforce them in such short order, but can't adhere to long established, internationally accepted human rights laws. Absolutely. I forgot to mention like the droning of other countries. That's all tied as well. All these issues are connected. Tony watches closely. If people continue following the two-party ridiculousness and voting, then we are definitely done for. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We got to break people out of this two-party illusion. Let's check out Rockfin here. We got some donations from people. Anna Maris, thank you very much for the donation. Said, if there are any survivors of climate collapse, I wanted to exclusively be those from the global south. All right, so this next topic here that we're going to discuss. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. We just talked about the crisis happening right now at the border with Haitian refugees. And just to tie that topic in with this topic, I was once again, very disappointed with some comments with a candidate that I supported during the 2020 primaries. You know, what she had to say, and that was none other than Tulsi Gabbard. Once again, last week we talked about some disappointing tweets that she made about 9/11. She's not looking at the root cause of why that happened, which is U.S. foreign policy. As well as what else did she say? As well as her comments about Africa and how she's saying that we have to be there, we have to send troops there because we got to fight terror. Not looking at how the U.S. creates these terrorists. They fund them, they create chaos, and then they use that as an excuse to stay in these countries. Well, now look at what she said about Haiti. She said Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, who she called out so remarkably in the 2019 primary debate stage. She said the humanitarian and national security crisis on the southern border is a direct result of your open border policy. As I said in my 2020 presidential campaign, we can't have a secure nation if we don't secure our borders. Again, like I mentioned in the last segment, what this is doing is trying to fix the problem with a bigger and bigger band-aid when it requires some serious surgery. You're having organ failure or a broken bone and you think that you can fix the problem with a band-aid? You're just going to make that band-aid bigger, even though our U.S. foreign policy and U.S. imperialism, that's not getting fixed. So we're just going to get even more refugees trying to come over here? What are we going to do? Continue to... And then look at who's in power still. The ruling predator class will still be in power. They're still going to give orders for those people in horses or people sending these refugees to internment camps. That's going to continue. Always look at the root of the problem, and then looking at that and trying to fix that is how you will actually fix the problem. But yeah, I just had it with her. I mean, I spent months, over a year, defending Tulsi Gabbard. And I guess me evolving and seeing through electoral politics and how this is not how we're going to solve our problems. That even if somebody sounds remotely anti-establishment, even just a little bit, they're going to be a problem for the establishment, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent that candidate from getting votes. I mean, our election systems are privately owned. It's impossible for an anti-establishment candidate to win. And even then, the bar is just set so low. It's so low. Tulsi Gabbard just had problems. She already had problems, which we will get into in just a bit here, about her stance on drones. But I think that I was just so infatuated with her policies being a lot better than even Bernie Sanders, whose policies I was infatuated with back in 2016, that I was too busy celebrating and defending her and being hopeful. And I'm sure many of you guys can attest to that as well. But this is following this interview that she had here with Tucker Carlson about her stance on drones. It's wow. Just listen for yourself, guys. I'm about to play it right now. Hang on a second. I have to play the volume. I have to play it with the volume here on my phone because I don't have speakers yet for this new computer. Ready? Whoops. 1, 2, 3.
Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. So you get to lie. I mean, this will not shock you because you've seen it so much, but you get to lie about the loss of human life. You get caught, and nothing happens to you? What kind of system is that?
I mean, this kind of accountability is critical. I want to point out first that anytime there are civilian casualties in war, it is tragic and terrible. Yeah. War is a terrible thing, and I think it's important for the American people to understand that Islamist jihadists are continuing to wage war against us. And the Islamist ideology, not the same as the religion of Islam, but this Islamist ideology, which is a political ideology that inspired the terrorist attacks on our country on 9/11, is the greatest threat that we're facing right now in this country and the world. It is the foundation of governance of so-called Islamic countries like Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And it's what's behind the discriminatory policies that they have in these countries against Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, and others. So as long as these Islamist jihadists are waging war against us, we have to work to defeat them militarily and ideologically. And militarily, we have two choices in how we do that. Number one, we can continue to invade and occupy and nation-building countries around the world, just as we did in Afghanistan, at great cost. Number two, we can take a targeted approach using airstrikes, using our special forces to go in and go after these terrorist cells. The reality is that the cost to the American people, the cost to our troops, the cost to civilians will be far less if we take this very targeted approach to go after these jihadist terrorist cells than if we continue making the very same mistakes that we saw in Afghanistan and other parts of the world of invasion, occupation, and nation building.
So what is different with how Tulsi sounds here and how somebody who was in the Bush and Cheney administration sounded, who were defending the decision to go to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, saying that we have to go after terrorists, saying that the problem is in the ideology that Islamists have. And that's the distinction that we have to make here. Islamists are not people who who are of the Islam. It's not everybody of the Islam religion. It's the extremists. But regardless, like, this is manufacturing consent for war. Like, the reason why we're there isn't because of that. And she knows better. She knows better. The reason why we go to those countries is for the resources that are there, for the oil, the rare earth minerals, to advance the agenda of the World Economic Forum and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Right? And we know this. We supported her because she would call out regime change war. Right now, all the wars that the U.S. is involved with is regime change war, and they use terrorism as an excuse. And now that's what Tulsi Gabbard is doing right here. And what's worse here is that this individual here that tweeted this out, I'm not exactly familiar with this person. You know, maybe I should be. I don't know. I haven't seen their work. I apologize. They said Tulsi Gabbard defends the use of drone strikes following the strike that killed 10 civilians, including an aid worker and 7 children in Kabul. And this is what was revealed thanks to Daniel Hale, the whistleblower, showing that the casualty rate from drone strikes is 90%. And here she is advocating for drones. But however, like I said earlier, this was always her stance. But yeah, here, this individual here, at Confused Prague, said, here's an article from January 20th, 2018, in which Tulsi discusses drones and special ops type missions. The author mentions her view about the war on terror. Perhaps some were not aware, but Tulsi didn't hide her views. This is published on The Intercept here. The difference I see is that when Tucker asked her about it, a horrendous, deadly drone strike involving civilians had just happened. Also, she had a limited time to respond to the short segment hit versus an article. So I guess she didn't have time to explain the nuances, but regardless, it's not a good look at all. Not at all. And if she joins the Republican Party, I'm not going to support her either. I'm not supporting any politician ever again. But then the solutions are in opting out of the system, organizing with your community, and direct action. We're going to talk about that later in the solutions portion of the stream. But yeah, here's the article. Tulsi Gabbard endorsed very limited use of drones against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's pretty consistent with what she was saying in Africa about, we have to have boots on the ground in Africa because of Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's what she's saying here, like going after terrorists. So it's not actually getting rid of war. I mean, we use terrorism as an excuse for regime change. But I guess we just didn't see it back then. Like, those of us that supported her, we were just really infatuated with her other political stances and the policies that she was introducing, and the bar was just set so low, so incredibly low, that she just really stood out. I subconsciously thought the good outweighed the bad and didn't pay enough attention to this right here. But yeah, also, as we've evolved so much since the primaries, a lot of us, that now just comments like this, it's just unexcusable for us to hear comments like that. Like, we see beyond that now. And Tulsi Gabbard is just stuck in 2019 mode where she was at. But now she's focusing on these positions that she had from back then that, we didn't really like, but we didn't pay enough attention to. But yeah, these drone strikes, as long as we still have these drone strikes, as long as the US continues to have these predators involved in calling the shots, that withdrawal from Afghanistan and from any country that we say we withdraw from won't be real. Stay informed, guys. All right, I'm going to go over two more topics. These are kind of solutions-based topics, so it's things to keep your eye open about so that you don't fall into certain traps like this, but also things to be aware about when you listen to pundits or when you read certain journalists. It's important for us to understand the difference between a reporter and an influencer. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. What is the difference between a reporter and an influencer? And I want to start off by asking you, reading some of the comments that you guys leave in the chat here. What do you think are the differences between a reporter and an influencer? You guys are very smart. I know a lot of you guys can see the difference in some of them already. And I just want to put some of the comments over here because I know you guys will have a lot of interesting things to say. The difference between a reporter and an influencer. And then the same can be said about a politician and an influencer. Although now there's not really much of a difference, right? No one wants to say what the difference is? I thought you guys were gonna... Okay. Anna Ringwald said something. All right. Journalistic standards and integrity. Well said. Yeah. Integrity and journalistic standards, that it doesn't matter what's popular at the moment. What matters is the truth. At a certain point, being against the mainstream COVID narrative was not popular, even in the independent media sphere. But, some people were riding the wave, and some people may have genuinely believed in the mainstream COVID narrative who are in the independent media. But some other people may have done it for calculated reasons. JVB, a reporter, he was closer to the facts. Ted Calvin, influencer is a lobby or spin / report is a repeater of facts. No such thing anymore since Smith Mangton. So I will say that mainstream media pundits, they're really focused on, their brand, like who they are. They're in this for a career. They could be said to be influencers. But we know that. We know not to trust mainstream media pundits. In the independent media sphere, however, there are some people that are in it for their own brand, for their career, as opposed to being in it primarily for the movement, for reporting facts, to actually try to raise consciousness, to keep people informed. A reporter wants to keep people informed, regardless of what's popular, regardless if it hurts their brand. In the long run, it's not going to hurt your brand if you're going to be telling the truth from the start, even if it's not popular. But just to give you guys an example, I will say people like Tim Black and Kyle Kalinske are examples of people that are influencers. Hassan Piker is an influencer. Vosh and Destiny and all these bread tubers, these debate me bros, those are influencers. People that are more focused on the numbers rather than actually reporting things that are true, rather than actually exposing things. These are influencers. People that, and now I'm seeing, some people that may go to protests just to show up and be like, hey, I was there, just to earn some points. But if there's not enough people going to that event, they won't go. They'll only go to an event if they see a lot of people go there. I've gone to events where there was only like 5 people there. Multiple times. Like when it comes to Assange, when it comes to, other events. And I even broadcast it. It was like, okay, there's not enough people here. Let's go walk around somewhere, like what I did with the DC action for Assange. Like, let's walk around and talk to people, hand out flyers. You can see footage of that here. Other people may hear, oh, there's not enough people going, I'm not going to go. And I understand that some people may not have time and all, but if you see a consistent pattern here where it's like all the time they don't go to these events. I have here an influencer copies their talking points and positions based on who is popular in the realm that they work in, rather than having their own opinion. If they change their mind, we see the genuine evolution and the mind change is acknowledged. Like if they were actually genuine, if they weren't just in it for their brand, we would see the evolution, the genuine evolution, and their mind change is acknowledged. They say, hey, I was wrong back then. You know, these influencers are going to try to brush it under the rug. You're like, what? I never said that. Or they just pretend like they never said it. So right now, we know Jimmy Dore is popular in this realm, right? In this independent media sphere. I mean, some people are calling him the king of independent media. You know, I want you guys to keep an eye on this. Jimmy Dore makes a video. He has a stance on something. His audience members, they understand what Jimmy is saying and his position, and then they adopt that position. I mean, their minds are open. And we see other smaller channels, they see the position that he adopted, that Jimmy Dore has, and then they take that position as well. And then they start repeating what Jimmy Dore said. Jimmy Dore initially wasn't against the vaccines, like the current vaccines that we had. Now he's spreading awareness about them. Initially, some people were very pro-vax as opposed to being pro-choice, and now Jimmy changed his position. Keep an eye out. Some people will change their position just because they saw Jimmy Dore change his position. However, there are some other people that didn't change their mind as Jimmy changed his mind and are now doubling down on being pro-mandate. And we don't have to name any names, but it's disappointing to see, you know, these people doubling down. Also, Max Blumenthal has come out and has exposed a lot of this COVID narrative, and people saw that, and then they either adopted that position or they're doubling down and being against what Max Blumenthal is saying, and there's being more pro mandates. Gamer for life. I still like Jimmy. Jimmy isn't perfect. Absolutely. Nobody is. Nobody's. And that's what we got to be understanding about. Like, just because someone was wrong about something doesn't mean we have to cancel them. And if they evolve on it, then that's great. We like to see that. The character development. Other people, like Tim Black, who I said was an influencer, is interested in his brand. He wants to have a position in Nina Turner's campaign for when she runs for president or when she runs for another position in office. Whether she runs as a congresswoman again or she runs as a senator again, Tim Black wants to have a position there, and he wants to continue to grow his brand. He wants to grow his brand by having beefs with other commentators like Jimmy Dore. Kyle Kalinske, interested more in his career. He skims through the news rather than actually going deep into what's actually being said, thinking critically about what he said, looking at what other sources have said, independent sources. Instead, he doesn't even know The Last American Vagabond exists, or that he doesn't even acknowledge Whitney Webb. He doesn't even acknowledge other journalists like Vanessa Beeley or Eva Bartlett. I don't think he even reads the Gray Zone. He just skims the mainstream news, just criticizes that, offers absolutely no solutions, and then he simps off of certain politicians like Bernie Sanders. And then he does a show with Crystal Ball, another careerist. Doesn't bring on certain people on his show because he thinks that they're too controversial. But he'll bring on other influencers like Vash. These are that's what makes, you know, an influencer. An influencer. They're interested more in the numbers than in actually putting out the truth. Not realizing that in the long run, being honest, being truthful, doing the work and informing yourself, thinking critically, helping your audience think critically, giving an in-depth analysis with your audience, to your audience, in the long run, that will actually help you. And it'll help everybody, actually. Like the whole goal should be to dismantle the ruling class, the ruling predator class, and so that we can have a government or a system that actually benefits the people, rather than it only benefiting these multinational assholes. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the chat. And as always, stay informed, guys. Deep, moody, purple blues. Whitney Webb is a badass. Delbert, I think you're referring to Kyle Kalinske. He's a fast talker and a slow thinker. Gamer for life. I used to be a fan of Tim, but not anymore. Oz Whistles, we have to dismantle class itself, otherwise the ruling class will keep popping up. Great point, Oz Whistles. Great point. A classless society with a higher level of consciousness so that we don't run into the same problem again that we had previously, right? All right, let's go over some of these super rays and then we'll move on to the last topic that I have here for you guys. Bubblegum douche. Hang on. If Tulsi wants to fight terrorism, shouldn't she be advocating for drone strikes in DC and Northern Virginia? CIA headquarters and Pentagon? I mean, yeah, the biggest terrorist organization or the most dangerous institution in the planet you can find here in the States, right? But yeah, she's too indoctrinated still. And since we've evolved past that, we just have to keep offering, you know, these better solutions to other people as opposed to just looking to candidates to save us, because they're not going to. So ZOXOVOXO said, you need to define reporter better. Some of them are overlapping. Influencers are generally famous and paid to propagandize you. Reporters can be famous and do the same thing. So the difference, so a reporter will prioritize on the truth first over their brand. The brand can come second. Of course, some of them have to make a living, right? To a reporter that's not much of really like an influencer first, are prioritizing on informing people regardless of how popular it is. At the time during 9/11, it wasn't popular to say that, you know, you guys already know. It wasn't popular to challenge the narrative about that. Very few were doing it. Some people may have discredited it because they didn't want to ruin their brand. Same thing with the narrative about why we need to go to Iraq. Another example of an influencer, Mehdi Hassan. right? He wouldn't be having that job in MSNBC if he wasn't an actual threat. A reporter would be asking tough questions even to movements that appear to be challenging the establishment. For example, asking tough questions to third parties that claim to be trying to dismantle the establishment. Let's be, how are you going to do this? Are you actually taking election integrity into account? Challenging and being critical of even the most progressive outsider politicians. A reporter pays attention to nuance, tries to not see things in black and white. But yeah, that's the key thing that separates a reporter from an influencer is integrity and nuance. I mean, there could be someone trying, but they just aren't good at seeing nuance. So I guess that's not really as good of a defining difference. But the biggest thing is integrity, and that they put telling the truth first. A reporter puts telling the truth first over their brand. An influencer will put their brand first over telling the truth. JVB, thank you very much for the tip. I really appreciate that. Ayan said it would be actually easy. Just don't stick to the same news sources all the time. The more, the better. The more diverse, the better. Stay curious. Absolutely, yeah. That's something that I've said from the beginning. Ever since I had Steve Poikonen on as a guest for the very first time, when he told me that I should be diversifying my sources, and I would tell my audience that as well. Diversify your sources. One journalist may be really good in this one area, but maybe lacking a little bit in this other area, in which, to fill in the void, check out this other journalist over here that's really good in that other area that other journalist is lacking in. One journalist may be excellent when it comes to foreign policy, but it's not so much informed about, not so much talking about domestic civil liberties. But this one journalist right here is really invested in domestic civil liberties. This other journalist right here is really invested in economics, and in like socialist theory or in libertarian theory. Then this other journalist right here is really invested in debunking the mainstream COVID narrative, right? Diversifying your sources. Or this other journalist right here is really good at talking about solutions or breaking things down at a basic level so that you can explain it to other people who aren't as informed as you. Diversity, diversity, diversity. Or this person right here knows a lot about what happened during 9/11. This person right here is really informed about what's happening in the Middle East. This person right here is really informed about what's happening in South America. This outlet right here is really informed about what's happening in Africa. This right here is really informed, is really good at criticizing the mainstream news. Like, they're just diversify your sources. I mean, not all of us have time to cover everything. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. I want to talk about 5 traps to be careful of, and I was influenced by this, about this, from Derek Bros, who made a video, and I want to give a shout out to him. He made a video that was titled "Video about 3 traps that people fall in." Let me share that for you guys real quick. Yeah, watch out for these 3 traps on your path to liberation. And I wanted to I wanted to add on a little bit to what he was saying, and I added on a certain trap that he didn't discuss that I've seen in some people. But yeah, these are definitely common traps that I see people get stuck in. You know, these people that are very informed, who are always listening to independent media or reading a lot of independent media. So the first trap that Derek Bros talked about was divisiveness, or the divider. So these are people that want to stay divided, like subconsciously, like they see things as teams, and they don't want to associate with anyone that's not on their team. There's a line, there is a line to draw. Like, for example, and as Derek Bros pointed this out as well, like, would you be hanging out with a Nazi? I personally wouldn't be hanging out with a Nazi. I mean, if like we ever run into each other and then like he wants to challenge my ideas and then like I challenge their ideas back, like out in public, I don't know, I'm just making up something of it. The chances of that are really low. Like I don't think I'd ever be in a place where a Nazi would be. But you get what I mean. Where there's a certain line to draw where we just don't want to associate with somebody, but it's just like way too much. But other things though, like for example, the divider that I was saying, they just don't want to associate with anyone that doesn't align with their comfort zone. And then their comfort zone is just so small. You know, whether it's pro-choice for vax team, or being a pro-all vax team, or being in the team for communism, or being in the team for libertarianism, and you don't want to associate with anybody else. This is what the ruling class wants us to be, right? They want us to be divided. And we have to be open to talking to everyone so that we can come to an understanding. We need to come to an understanding and find common ground and what we can all fight for together so that we can actually take power away from the people that are oppressing us. If we stay divided, we're not going to succeed. We're lacking power that way. We gain power in numbers. But like this trap, the people that are in the division trap, they stay with these assumptions and generalizations about people and other groups. So they're like, oh, this person believes in this, or this person calls himself a communist. He must be thinking this, not understanding that there's a lot of nuances there with people who consider themselves communists. Like there's Marxist-Leninists and just Marxists, and there's Marxist-Leninist Maoists, and there's Trotskyists, and even within that, there may be some nuances. Like I've met Marxist-Leninists that keep up with Whitney Webb's work, and Whitney Webb is a libertarian. I've met communists that don't buy into the mainstream media COVID narrative, and others that there's a lot of them that do. But it doesn't mean that they're all the same. You got to look at everybody case by case, person by person. And we talked about this a little bit last week. Remember, like when we talk to people, we have to try to be understanding of them. You have to understand where they came from, you know, why it is that they think what they believe in, and try to not force them to change their mind. Try to just plant seeds in them and just give them other perspectives that are like, hey, I mean, have you considered this? The goal isn't to change their mind right then and there. The goal is to change their mind maybe eventually, like in the long term, by planting seeds in them and being gentle with them and having them understand that you are on their side, that you are not an enemy. Like you guys saw, I went on the Vanguard despite the disagreements that I have with those guys. I am still going to talk to them despite the disagreements and plant some seeds to try to help them see things the way that I see things, or at least be understanding of why I see things this way, and as well as their audience. Plant some seeds. I'll try to plant seeds for their audience so that they can start seeing things and understanding why me and other people see things the way that we do. And trust me, guys, I understand how hard it can be. Like we want to unleash on people like who disagree with you especially when they're being like mean or trolly online. And if somebody's being like too trolly or mean online, just distance yourself from them. You don't have to waste your time arguing with them if they don't want to change their mind. You can maybe just put your idea down, and then if they are just going to be mean and trolly, then just move on and talk to somebody else. You don't waste time with somebody who's clearly not going to change their mind right then and there, and is interested in gaining points as opposed to trying to reach common ground. Right? Be the bigger person and move on to somebody else. The second trap that was mentioned was the defeatist. These are people that shut every idea down. Like, they are so pessimistic. They see no hope in anything, in any solutions. Many people believe that what we are fighting is so insurmountable that they've lost all hope, and that's understandable. But I mean, there are still, like, clearly people that are waking up and seeing all the problems that are around, and we can still figure something out to mitigate the harm that's being done to us. And then we can, like, there are ways that we can all organize together and take power away from the corporations. Like, there is a way. And we will figure that out. The more that we talk to each other, the more that we organize and actually get started on things with direct action events, organizing with your community, with more mutual aid, discussing with people about what strategy is most effective. But these defeatists, what they do is they shut down any idea you bring up to them, and then they themselves don't come up with any solutions. They call everything controlled opposition, or they call everyone a shill, or they call everyone useless, or they say, oh, they used that, or they created that, like the ruling class, they did that, and then so that's why we can't use it. And then meanwhile, like I said, they're not doing anything to improve their own lives or anyone else's lives. What these people in this trap, the defeatist trap, they're addicted to complaining. Now, this doesn't mean being unrealistically hopeful is still believing in politicians to solve our problems for us, or like, there's a line to be drawn between being unrealistically hopeful and being like a defeatist. Like, there is a nuance, like a gray area there that we can be at. Like, there's a spot there to be realistically hopeful. But another thing about these defeatists is they stay stuck in this angry phase. And another way that this gets manifested in I've seen in a lot of commentators, is that they stay stuck in this angry phase, that they're not even talking about solutions at all, or they just stay stuck with an idea of one solution, and then they're not even doing anything about it, or not even acknowledging the problems with that solution. And all they do is just have segment after segment after segment, just complaining and just talking about the mainstream news and complaining about the mainstream news, and then not even actually diving into their solution that they're offering and seeing how effectively they can reach their goal through that solution that they're offering. Like, for example, if your idea of a solution is via third parties, you have to be open to some of the problems that come with electoral politics and election integrity and all that, and not just shutting it down immediately. You got to be realistic. And also, for the other people that see beyond electoral politics, don't be shutting everything down. Be open. All right, go to some events, talk to some people. Don't just stay closed off and assume that nothing is going to work. Okay, some of these things that we can use, such as crypto, yeah, the ruling class are trying to take advantage of cryptocurrency, but we can still use that as a tool. Just like we can use money as a tool. Like paper money, like we can use that as a tool. The third trap that Derek Bros talked about is normalcy bias. And this is when people aren't taking other people's warning and instead just accept every change and allow them to feel normal after some time after the change is implemented. And a prime example of that are mandates in the COVID narrative. First, it was the mask mandate. No, first was the lockdowns. And people were like, oh, okay, like people just accepted it. And then they implemented mask mandates. People accepted it. They're like, oh, okay, time passed on. They're like, oh, I guess this is the new normal. Then the vax mandate, now that became a little extreme. And thankfully, people are waking up to that. However, other people are accepting it as something that's new and normal. And we shouldn't accept that as something normal. It's not normal. This isn't like humans didn't evolve to be like wearing a mask like this as all these germs accumulate on you. They don't even educate us on the proper way to use masks. Like humans have this system in them for natural immunity to develop. And it doesn't mean that there aren't some vaccines that are actually effective at what they do. There are vaccines like that. But that shouldn't be the only thing that we rely on, especially when they're rushed out and we don't know what the adverse effects are. We don't know what the side effects are. We don't know how it will interact with people who have hormone deficiencies or have other hormonal problems, or how it will affect people of certain age groups. We can go on and on about that. Or when other disasters happen, and then the state takes advantage of that, such as how Naomi Klein described in her book with disaster capitalism, like these shock doctrines. The ruling class, these multinationals, take advantage of those events to implement policies that will benefit them and will take away our civil liberties so that they can advance capitalism and enrich themselves. Sometimes this happens gradually and then we just accept it. So to get out of that trap is to not just stay comfortable with the new changes, because eventually you're not going to be comfortable. They're just going to be gradually implementing more and more changes that will affect you directly and take away freedoms from you. And so what you have to do is listen to the warnings that people give you. People were warning about vaccine passports a long time ago. Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond, Derek Bros, I believe Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley were talking about this as well. Max Blumenthal was talking about this. Don't just dismiss this. Be like, oh, no. And then you just like focus on what makes you comfortable. Don't fall into that trap, right? That's the normalcy trap. These things are not normal. Having two parties owned by the same people isn't normal. Droning other countries isn't normal. Like killing people in other countries with drones, that's not freaking normal. We see these liberals accepted just because there's a Democrat in office. And even when there's a Republican in office, they're just like, oh, I mean, we just got to get these terrorists. That's just how things are. No, that's not just how things are. We need to fix this. And you have a responsibility. Like I said, these are things we have to stand up against, hit the streets, and fight to change. Don't be afraid, because there's other people maybe seeing things the same way that you're seeing them, and they're just too afraid to say anything. But then when they see someone else speak up about it, then they speak up about it. And we saw that when I was at the Capitol, there were other people that went up to me and went up to Colin and were thanking us for calling out AOC and Cori Bush, because they were too afraid to say something, because they didn't want to look crazy in front of that crowd of sycophants. Ooh, this next trap here that I'm gonna say is a trap that Derek Bros did not talk about, because I don't think he's experienced this, but it is kind of similar to the previous traps. But I have encountered this with people who I got close to in my Discord community, and it was heartbreaking. This next trap that, you know, I came up with is called the Cynic. When it's no longer critical thinking what these individuals have, it's now cynicism. So, like I said, I personally encountered this with a few people like this in my very own Discord community. They stay attached to the channels that they cut out. So they find one flaw in a journalist or a commentator, and then all of a sudden, that one flaw that one commentator journalist has disregards all their previous work. I mean, there is a line to be drawn. Like, for example, for my cutoff, originally, like it was like 2 years ago, my cutoff was like, I'm not going to listen to anybody who falls into the Russiagate narrative. And of course, there can be some exceptions. Like if somebody is just like absolutely exceptional when it comes to everything else. But I mean, that's such a rare case. Like if you can't see through Russiagate, then your critical thinking skills are not very good. Like you're too caught up in the two-party illusion at that point if you're falling into Russiagate. So that was my cutoff. Now, my cutoff is people who are doubling down on pro-mandates. I'm not really going to listen to those people. But primarily because I can get the same information or even a deeper analysis from other commentators and journalists. There's other commentators and journalists that do a much better job. I mean, again, there's some exceptions. Like for example, if somebody is not really, hasn't even expressed their position on it, but is doing an exceptional job informing people about what's happening in Syria or in Iraq or in the global south, etc. And I mean, that's their area of focus, then I'm fine with them. I'm fine with listening to them and getting informed. You know what I mean? But for these cynics, though, like I said, they no longer have critical thinking. It's now cynicism. It's like, oh my God, that person's sus. Oh, that person's moving funny. All right, what are you basing that off of? I don't know. They're just moving funny. How? I don't know. They just are. Like their standards just go up and up, and like they just move it to the next person and to the next person. Like for example, they cut people off first at TYT. Understandable. And then they move on to like the David Doles and Humanist Reports. Understandable. And then they move on to cutting off Jimmy Dore. And then they move on to cut off people in the MCSC network and the Gray Zone. And then they move on to cut off Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley. Like, because they see like a flaw that they had or a position that they had in the past that they had evolved on. Or they're just like we're all not perfect, right? We're all human beings. There are some things that we're not going to see things, you know, like we're not going to see through. I mean, we're going to try, but we're, like I said, we all have flaws. Right? We all have some biases. As long as we have, and we're trying to be objective, and we have done great work in the past with other things, then, I mean, what's the problem? Where are you going to get your information from? If you're just cutting everybody off, nobody's perfect. And then they become addicted to complaining about people. And then they're so invested with that, they're not even trying to get informed about what's happening in the world. Like I said, it's good to have critical thinking, but understand what is based on reality and what are just assumptions. Otherwise, you get caught up in conspiracy theories about people, and it's all based around just feelings that you have about a person. Like, oh my gosh, this person's friends with that person. Oh, they must be assuming this. Like, how do you know that they're not discussing their disagreements in private with that person that you think is problematic? Like, you gotta be self-aware and ask yourself, like, are these criticisms valid? Are they really based on reality, or are they just assumptions that I have about the person? And just think to yourself, maybe everyone's not not the problem. Maybe it's your unrealistic and hypocritical standards that's the problem. So the last and final trap, this was, so Derek Bros mentioned there was 3. I listed 4 because I added one. This last one is one that he mentioned at the end. Like this, it's the 4th trap that he mentioned that wasn't, it's not in the title. But I guess he just wanted to add on, and I guess he discovered it during his analysis. But he mentioned the lone wolf. So I think all the other traps I listed can lead to this. So this is ultimately an isolationist. Someone who doesn't want to associate with anyone at all because they see a problem in everything and everyone. And we haven't evolved to be like that. We are community organisms. Like, we need other people in order to survive. We're not solitary animals. We are community animals. We learn from the older generation, and then the things that we learn, we teach other people. If we're good at something, we fulfill a role in the community. Right? We can't do this alone. The problems are not going to be fixed if you decide to leave by yourself in some forest. It's not going to go away that way. You're just going to leave a whole bunch of people suffering as you move away. I mean, is that truly love in that case? I mean, you are showing love to yourself. But what about the love to your extended self? If you've decided to move on like that, you're well aware of the destruction to the environment that's being caused, and on other people, and on animals, on the air, the plants, the animals, all the environment that you are a part of. You are a part of this world. You interact with this world. What is out there in this environment goes inside of you. The oxygen, the food, all of that. If all of that is getting destroyed and then you start consuming that, is that truly love for yourself? It's not showing love to the extended self. Not showing love to the extended self is not truly showing love to yourself. It's not conscious enough. All right, so that is it for my segments today. Now we'll move on to the solutions discussion. And then after that, I do want to say that I'll stick around in the Discord so that we can play some games. So where's Propaganda at? My boy Propaganda was telling me about how we can play games on Discord. So hopefully he helps me get started with that. But right now, I'm going to open up the Discord voice chat. If you're interested in being a part of this conversation, join the Discord link that's in the description. And if you don't see it, I believe there will be some moderators there that can share a link. All right, we got the Discord voice channel open. You can go ahead and join. We can discuss solutions. And also, let's focus on solutions this time. If you guys want to talk about any of the things that I discussed just now, because that is part of the solutions discussion, like noticing these flaws and being self-aware. We can talk about that. What's up, Shim? Can you hear me well? Hello.
Yes, I can.
How's it going, man? Hello, Lucky. Can you hear me?
Good.
Hang on a sec. Oh, I remember. My microphone isn't attached in my laptop, so I gotta use my phone.
Congressman, thanks so much for coming on.
1 second here. They can only listen to my audio from my from this video. Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Namaste, fam.
All right, sounds good. We got Oz Whistles here. We got Jack Sith. We got Shim. We got Lucky. What's up? How are you guys doing?
What's
going on? Hey, Loki.
Hey, guys.
Jack. What's going on, Oz?
Good. Just gotta get my mic set.
What's on your mind, Jack?
The whistles. Not a lot, really. Just the crypto markets, like I was telling everyone earlier, have been taken down. They'll probably go back down again because they got to kick more people out. So seeing some interesting things there. Some stuff with Solana, issues with their master nodes, all kinds of just shadiness going on.
With crypto?
Yeah, it's more of like, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I mean, it's just looking at Wyckoff patterns, and that's pretty much, that'll help you.
So I mentioned in the stream that crypto can be used as a... Hang on, I'm hearing an echo here. Can you guys mute your mics?
Yeah.
It's coming from Sasuke.
I mentioned in the stream that
All right. Yeah, so I mentioned in the stream how crypto can be used as a tool, much how like paper money can be used as a tool. How much of that do you agree with, Jack?
I agree only from the standpoint that we have to be sober about what we're dealing with, and I think it's a false assumption to think that everyone can, or that everyone should be, have the understanding needed, not just for the privacy aspects, but for long term. Because what I'm seeing a lot of is speculation, and not to generalize, but I mean, it makes sense. People get excited when they realize that, hey, I bought a little bit of this and it turned into this a little bit later. So I don't really see the counter economics coming from like Bitcoin or anything that's institutionalized like Ethereum or anything like that. Those have massive $1 million foundations, or they're being traded on futures markets. So the main coins that I'm looking at just from a privacy standpoint, and again, I have issues with all of these, so do your own research. But first one be Monero, because when people think about Bitcoin, usually from the privacy standpoint, they're thinking of Monero. But again, Monero has its own issues. I think the Monero market's pretty manipulated, and it's not perfect privacy. A better project in my eyes is like Pyrochain. It goes by R. It uses what's called ZK snarks, zero knowledge proofs, meaning that people can you can verify something happened cryptographically, or that something happened mathematically without having to know what that thing was. Meaning that you can verify a transaction without having to know even the parties were involved with the actual transaction. So that's Pyrochain. And then Mina Protocol is very cool. It's a newer one I'm looking into. I think they just did a partnership with Matic, which is a layer 1 or layer 2 scaling for Ethereum. And so that's Mina is pretty cool because they have a 22 kilobit, which is insanely small blockchain, and it'll never go larger than 22K. They're also using ZK snarks, zero knowledge proofs, and that's actually how they keep it so small. So you've got those projects, and then actually a very cool one that's been actually doing very well in this market right now, and pretty interesting, Dero, that's D-E-R-O. It's a smart contract platform that is similar to Ethereum, but it's completely private. So those projects and a couple others, things I would avoid, like there's a long, I don't want to call it a con, but it's kind of people don't, it's never explained well to people, and that's Dash, and I would avoid it. Dash is not private. There's a few others, like Zcash is not private, because they allowed, even though Zcash uses ZK snarks and uses zero knowledge proofs, it's not private because they made privacy optional. If you make privacy optional, that means the exchanges where you have to, show your ID to get the shit from, it's not private because they're going to send it to you transparently. And someone did an analysis showing that they could look at 13% of all transactions.
Yeah, the biggest problem here, or the biggest thing to be worried about with crypto, because it looks like that's where the future is headed towards, is having everything be crypto based, is to keep tabs on
100%.
everybody and to keep tabs on everything that we do, all our exchanges. But I mean, is there any way that we can ever keep everything encrypted and hidden from
Sure.
the people in charge?
So you bring up a great point, and that's that the main drive on a lot of these blockchains is data analytics, spending patterns, down to they want to, the Internet of Bodies, digital twins. I'm not going to go too deep into that. The way that I see to fight it is that you don't give them that data. And the way you don't give them that data is you don't use a transparent blockchain or surveillance coin, which is what I call Bitcoin, Ethereum, ADA. I wouldn't use ADA for a multitude of reasons. If you look at what they're doing in Africa is a massive one. They're putting children on the freaking blockchain. So in my eyes, it's not really that we're going to be able to win, so to speak, but it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. It's levels of damage mitigation that we can all do. So, and again, I'm not even advocating for people to get into cryptos. I think everyone should just approach it, be wide-eyed about it, and realize that there are a ton of people that are giving advice right now on it that they got in when it was like $1 to $10 to $1,000. And so all of their advice, I'm not going to name drop, but the guy's name begins with an M, has been making rounds on some channels, and he's been saying some patently false. I'll just go ahead and say it. It's Max Kaiser. He's said some things that I disagree with, where he said Bitcoin's uncensorable, and that's patently false. Because when you go to an exchange, if you're an American, you go to an exchange, they require you show your ID. They now have your ID. If they don't like your speech or something like that, what's to stop them from saying that that's quote unquote tainted?
Right.
That it was involved in X thing or something like that.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
How are they using the children in Africa? Can you expand on that part? How
Sure. So
they're doing
Great
that?
question.
So there was a great article, and I don't think it's no longer up anymore, but the basics is that they essentially want to, from almost cradle to grave, they want to capture their down to an AI level of training where they'll monitor, essentially they just want to collect as much data as possible. They see people now as, and again, you've heard this, data is the new oil. Mm-hmm. They're taking that to the nth degree of that, to where they'll be literally following these kids throughout their lives, using that to input into models. I think there could be some involvement with these, they're called, Franco, do you know what they're called? Value.
Oh,
there's an exchange.
value-based something. We discussed this with Sebs and Ali.
Yeah.
Is it
Value-based system or something that's how they base their decisions off of how much they can invest in the person.
Yeah.
So if a person is healthier or doesn't have so many disease, histories of diseases, or aren't they don't have a family history of diseases, then they're okay, if this person's worth investing in more than this person that does have a history of diseases. They're more likely to die, so there's no point in investing so much, resources in that individual. It's really effed up.
Precisely, because that's actually, if you look into, and again, this was on a great article by Sebs and Ali, where they went over our healthcare system, where they're doing value-based outcomes and how it's very Hitlerian, because essentially, you have a deterioration index.
The social credit score, is that what it was?
I mean, I don't know. I think that all this is kind of related, so it could end up leading to something like that. But I think what they're most after is, when you think of, and this is kind of the nefarious thing about it, is kids are they're not tainted by the world yet. And so I think that what they're doing is they're trying to capture data to feed into their machine learning, to feed into their AI, and they're going for the as young as possible, because it's I don't even know the correct word to use, but it's just like it's a source that they are after,
Well, it's
and
probably
it's
their algorithm
gross.
of how they built that, and children are so like moldable. Like, even if that's normal their whole life, then
Exactly, Lucky.
it's gonna be normal. Like, they're not gonna think about it any other way.
You're talking about a blockchain, not a currency here, right? Or is that African thing, is that also a currency?
Yeah, that's related to ADA, also known as Cardano, and I've got tons of issues with Charles Hoskinson from the simple standpoint that he looks like if you've watched one of his like press announcements, it's so fake. Like, it looks like his publicist has just said, these are the points you got to go over. He's thrown like other crypto channels under the bus before, and then I've called it like correctly that those crypto channels will never push back on him because he's like, one of the main dudes behind Cardano.
I had one more question too about crypto. What about like the way like the Rockfin, like the Ray coin, like how is that looking for not only just like the content creators? Like, is that good for them, or is that something that is worth an investment in? You know what I mean? Like, just in a general. I know you're not a financial, but.
Yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah, so I've just started reading through their white paper, and the thing that I will give them props for is they're at least up front when they say that people who join the platform first will get rewarded more than those that come later because they want to reward early adopters. I don't know if it's equitable because I'm going to call it a critique because I overall I think we need as many platforms as we can get. I'm not necessarily saying Rockfin's the one. I'd say it's healthy to have an appetite of multiple platforms because you never know who's going to be censored. But the critique I have on Rockfin is I think that they make it way too hard for their content creators to cash out of Ray. Just the process diagram that I saw alone for what content creators have to do, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that you have to go through a DEX, a decentralized exchange, and then convert it into ETH and do all this other crazy stuff. Whereas they could use like atomic swaps.
Well, I mean, Franco, is it like kind of like a co-op, like a member owned a little bit? So like maybe you guys could like as a block like email them and say like, hey, like we need an easier way for this to happen if that's if that's difficult.
Like since it is a co-op, everyone who's on Rockfin, like Rockfin is a cooperative, we could all do that and ask, hey, like, can we make this easier? Like, they are trying to make it in a way where like we get our Ray tokens, it can get converted directly as opposed to, first converting it to Ethereum and then, to, dollars. So I mean, they are working on it.
It's really
Can you all hear me?
kind of moldable, it's moldable,
Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys, do you guys think that...
Hey, Oz, can you hear me down there?
Yeah. Who is that?
I'm Fingerman on...
Fingerman, what's up?
But I'm SFT on your chat. I was just going to say to anybody looking at Ray, I would consider that a poor investment unless you're really invested in that company, and their tech support's pretty bad. So I'd give them a thumbs down. But when you invest in any crypto, you have the opportunity to park it or, put it into kind of like a savings area, and then they have various ways of rewarding you for doing that.
Is that like the cold wallet?
I mean, that sounds, I think that maybe thinking of staking, I don't know if you can stake the Ray coin, but I mean, I agree with your assessment. If you're not a content creator, I don't know why you would invest in Ray unless like that's your jam, like Rockfin you think is going to be the absolute future. Because I think there's other platforms like Odyssey that have much better incentive models where you opt in for rewards, and I've looked at how they give those rewards. They've flagged, I've given the rewards have been given on videos that would never be. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you knew the algorithm was a little bit messed up, it wouldn't reward those videos because there's too much truth in them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100% there. And again, I think Rockfin's tech is weak. That's another criticism from a whole different direction.
Oh,
user
yeah,
interface is very important.
That UX is like, I don't know who developed it, but I would love to find a good UX designer to help them with that, because like just from like portrait mode, like simple things that we get used to, trying to use it in different apps, it's insane how much that app messes up.
Yeah.
So I want to.
And I can tell you firsthand as a developer that could be fixed by now. They could go in and do what they need to do, and they're just not investing in that area. And if
They just need a good UX designer. Like they literally just need a UX designer, right?
Agreed.
I wanted to ask you guys. I think we agree that we are moving more towards crypto. Like we see crypto as the future, but in terms of opting out of the system and relying less on corporations, should this be the direction that we go? Like, should we, when we have like our own parallel societies, as we take power away from corporations, should we have our own crypto system, or should we move on to another type of economic system? What do you guys think?
I mean, so CBDCs are gonna be the thing. Like they're gonna be pushing and rolling in CBDCs, which are central bank digital currencies, which is they've already been piling this with the digital yuan. One thing to note about digital yuan is that they added expirations on those, meaning that you would get government money and it would have an expiration date if you didn't spend it by that date. Now, my hope is that when they try to push CBDCs, because people have been exposed to real cryptos, that they're smart enough to see that it's useless. And that by that time, atomic swap technology, which atomic swaps is just, you literally don't need an exchange, and you can do a trustless exchange from one currency to another it's an atomic swap because it's one for one, and you don't need a centralized exchange. Now we get atomic swaps. I don't think you'll be able to, even then, if we had the technology now, it's just not mass adopted because it's pretty complex. But even then, like, my concern is that, okay, so they may let us opt out from the standpoint that we can cash out of CBDCs into like Ethereum or Bitcoin or something that's trackable. We're going to need a way to get it into other things, So really right now, to me, it's like damage mitigation. It's not that one thing is going to be saving us. It's that there's various degrees of how bad it can go, and there's also various degrees of how good it can go, and just trying to find our way around that.
Is it a trap?
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
As far as pragmatics go, on the ground, do you recommend something like BitPay or Atomic as an app? Sounds like you're into the Atomic protocol.
No, not the Atomic protocol. The thing I'm talking about is atomic swaps, but so it is a little confusing because there is an Atomic DEX that I think does use atomic swap technology. But like things like BitPay, that's the last cold wallet hot wallet that I would recommend, from the standpoint that it's very institutionalized and it's not user friendly. It doesn't have really good coin control, meaning if you get like inputs from multiple people, you can't necessarily choose which ones you spend. So there's other wallets that are much better than that. For convenience though, like this is where like I'm kind of at a like crossroads, because when it comes to convenience, you can use BitPay to cash out into Amazon or like gift cards and like real world stuff pretty easily. But again, it's like I feel that's more of a way to get people used to keeping stuff in a hot wallet versus keeping things, stored in a safe, not that it's any. Yeah, technically it's more safe if you have like a hardware wallet, but I do feel more to get people disconnected from that. Yeah.
Compared to Coinbase, I prefer that personally, but Coinbase is run by banks. Absolutely. Pretty much. It's almost, yeah.
So it's like, if you look at the futures markets, the fact that there's a CMF, Chicago Mercantiles Exchange, futures markets, where essentially like you can go look at what the Bitcoin price is before the weekend, and there's a good chance it'll correct. If it goes above over the weekend, and then on Monday, because the futures opens, the price will normally come back to where it was. Like that's how nuts like a lot of this stuff is.
Damn.
I think that's something that people are worried about too, is because it can go up and down. Like, if you have it in, like in dollars, like we know what that is. You know what I mean? If you have $20, you have $20. But like, but if you have the Bitcoin, if you have it, I guess you have a wallet, right? But then you also have money that kind of will go up and down too.
So
I'm newer.
So yeah, there's a. I didn't mean to cut you off, Lucky, but there's a solution sort of solution. There's these things called stable coins. They'll always be pegged to right around $1. But then it comes into which ones do you trust? Now, personally, I don't trust USDT, which is Tether. I think it's backed by unicorn sparks and like farts and whatever, just because they have all this list of collateral that's supposedly backing it, but they mint like you can sometimes calculate when the next like bull run's going to happen by how much money they print. So they're no different than central banks in my eyes. The other options are like USDC, but that's Coinbase's stable coin. So I partially think that's probably going to become what could be a model for the CBDC, but that's just speculation. But so ones that I would recommend, like True USD looks like an interesting one. Do your own research, but there's like that. And essentially, like it's that problem you were saying. You could hold it into this form that would be pegged to $1, so it'd be the equivalent of cash.
Okay.
But at the same time, so like the ones that I look into, like True USD and then DAI. The reason why I say DAI is because DAI is a stable coin that is an algorithm. It's algorithmically backed, meaning all of its the way that it works is it's backed by math, so it doesn't require someone printing it or doing stuff from the traditional standpoint like Tether.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And I mean, another thing to remember is that it doesn't have value unless we see value in that, right? Like if everyone is like, no, Bitcoin is no longer a thing, it has no value, then it won't have any value for anybody. So the more
100%.
value it, as a currency and understand it, the more it becomes, a replacement from, like the petrodollar and everything else too, is the way I kind of see it. But I think that it's so vastly complex that I think that there almost needs to be like a layman's freaking coin. You know what I mean? Like where it is like very simple and beginner and something that people can really like grasp.
And that's my biggest complaint with the crypto industry in general is that I think they overly even though I've said things that are very complicated in a sense, zero knowledge proofs, that's a very complicated concept, but I try to simplify it when I explain it, but I do think a lot of this is forcibly made super complicated. Like just looking at some of these white papers I've read on some of these coins, like not everyone's going to read the white papers. Which are essentially just documents saying this is what we say our project's going to do. These are why we're doing it. This is how we're going to do it. This is the math behind it. This is the science behind it. You know what I'm saying? Like you go reading through those and it's just like the normal average person. Like I agree 100%. I don't necessarily think need to be a whole nother currency. I think that there needs to be a way to simplify this to decrease the complexity for average people.
Yeah,
including me.
Just because elder, boomers have like cell phones and they can, do that on their phone, or even me, I'm 41, but I'm not a tech person. Like I just, I'm a tactile artist, and that's how I am with other things. Steve does the digital stuff, but to make it like something that is just much simpler and very basic for people, then I think they'll be more likely to switch over to that, because I think that they're going to kind of get they could be left behind with this, and then suddenly where do they go from there? They won't know where to enter.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing
I have a question along that lines. What wallet that you can download either from Google Play or fdroid.org do you use currently?
So the wallets that I recommend to people, if you want ease of use, Exodus is one of my favorites because it has so much coin support and it can support multiple assets. It's very user friendly. It tells you if you want to stake something, it tells you how much you have to have, how many days. It's not like some of these other wallets where you just stake and then literally you find out that, oh, your shit's locked up for 28 days and you can't do shit about it. This warns you about those things, so it's called Exodus. You can go to exodus.io. Another great wallet is called Cake Wallet. That's more designed for Monero and XMR, but their Bitcoin wallet is fantastic. They also allow non-KYC exchange from Bitcoin to other currencies. Essentially, they allow you to do that for most currencies, and it's not super painful, but it is a little complicated. So that's Cake. Some other ones, there's some that I can recommend. I can't recommend them though because it could get Franco's channel pulled. Like,
Thanks for keeping that in mind.
Yeah. But
money guys get uptight. Just to explain some terms to people about, I call it parking, you call it staking, and that's the term that you'll see in the white papers. But staking means that you're going to have to make a deposit that they're going to hold on to and lock up for 28 days. Is actually, you can lock it for different periods in certain exchanges.
It also depends on the coin too, and it depends on their staking protocols. And so that's the really complicated thing to me is that you've got to learn how to stake each one. Like some have minimum requirements, like Solana, DOT, for example. You got to have one DOT in your wallet. So you've got to know that from the bat. Like Elron, like the cheapest staking I've seen is like one Elron, and that's like $240 right now. You know what I'm saying? So like you got to keep stuff like that in mind. Again, I'm not too big into staking.
What was the app you said that was Cake? C-A-K-E?
Yeah, Cake Wallets. So the backstory behind Cake Wallet and reason why I like it is you can run your own node. If you get as you get more advanced, like learning into cryptos, you can start running your own nodes, and you could use that with that wallet. Same thing with Exodus, by the way. But more so because it was created by a disgruntled person who was on Coinbase and had a shit ton of Bitcoin, and they made one dark web purchase for antibiotics just to try it out. And because their account got flagged, this is before everyone knew about blockchain analytics. Their account got flagged, and this person lost all of their shit. So they literally went out to design a wallet to be as decentralized as possible.
6 months ago, when I was doing a deep dive on this, I passed on Exodus. I didn't see Cake Wallet. I set something up. I believe I used BitPay to set it up, but I had a hard time transferring. I actually had to go get a wallet off one of the exchanges. I think Southeast Asia, if you're familiar with that one. But these details that other people are hearing may have a hard time understanding what we're trying to do. What I'm trying to do is tell people, okay, he's saying check out this Exodus app, or you could do Cake Wallet, either one. I don't know why I asked Exodus. There's something they're tiered to a bank or something. They got to be.
The thing I don't like, there's a critique I have about Exodus, and that's that they offer what are called Exodus shares, where you could buy their shares into their wallet, like funding or whatever, and from their wallet. So again, yeah, you're right. There's none of these wallets are perfect. They're just levels of what you're willing to deal with. The main thing I do like about Exodus is that if you want to get into staking, you don't need a separate wallet. Like you don't need to download like 18 wallets just for staking. But more so, I do like its ease of use.
Yeah, that's two wallets for me. Or actually, it was one wallet and then one direct exchange. But yeah, I get the idea. Crypto can be complicated for people opening accounts. Coinbase is all over the place, but Coinbase, you have no privacy, zero privacy with what you do on Coinbase. Precisely. It's worse than your bank account. It's worse than your bank account as far as personal privacy. But yeah, I agree that we need to have a crypto. I think right now, even from my point of view, even Bitcoin's disappointing in that it's not being used much as a payment method. A lot of people are trying to use it as an investment vehicle rather than a currency. It's a bad thing to, buying into Bitcoin is like going out and buying a bunch of Japanese yen or something like that. It's kind of a risky buy when you think about it as an investment.
I'm mixed. Yeah, I agree. Like the thing with Bitcoin for me is that first off, all of the crypto market currently moves off of what Bitcoin does. That's why I think like it is safe to see Bitcoin as like a store of value, because essentially everything you go to exchanges, everything's measured in units of Bitcoin or Satoshis. So when you look at that, if you can find this is where it comes into an issue. Is you got to know when to enter and exit the markets. But holding Bitcoin right now, you know what I'm saying? Like to me, it's kind of like, because everything's so tied to it, and Ethereum is probably one of the first currencies to move up while Bitcoin was, standing still. That just shows me that Ethereum's even more speculative. So again, like it's kind of hard because as a store of value, Bitcoin, like again, like your stable coin is going to be like your most secure store of value because it's always going to be pegged to one. And then like you're right though, we do need ways to look into that because Bitcoin's not perfect.
I currently parked or staked, as you would call it, in Bitcoin. I think Bitcash too. I may have put some in Bitcash, but I just put it there and said, forget about it. I'll just come back to it in 10 years. Maybe it'll be worth worth something, or it might be worth zero. I really don't care.
Yeah. Look into the services. I do know a friend showed me Celsius the other day, forced an arbitration clause because they don't insure what they hold, meaning that they could tomorrow say they're hacked and you would have no access to your funds. You may want to look in to see whatever service you used if they have an arbitration clause. It's just kind of sketchy that they would update their terms of service. Again, this was Celsius. Now, there is a difference. So apps like Celsius, you're not staking necessarily. What you're doing is parking's probably the best word for it, but you're essentially putting it into a savings account, into what's called a custodial account, meaning it's not like an Exodus wallet, which is non-custodial, meaning that you own it. This means you're trusting in a third party, essentially to have an IOU saying that you hold this crypto with them. But like I say, if they don't offer insurance, then at any day, like if you look back in crypto history, you'll see all these exchanges that apparently got hacked, and I always noticed those were times when liquidity was likely an issue. You kind of got to connect two and two. So definitely be careful with any apps like that.
I feel like the thing that
Agreed.
scares people away too is that it feels like it's kind of like a stock market for your money in a smaller scale. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, you know,
Pretty much.
you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like it's risky for people, especially that don't have a lot of money, to be investing into something like that, and that's why it feels like it's more of a stock market investment to people, because there isn't just something that is like remains very stable or very close to stable, because people are so close on their, like, you know, their budgets, and you know, like people just don't have it to have it.
And that's why it's hard for me to, you hit it on the head, that's why it's hard for me to like I don't really advocate for people to get in or out of crypto. I try to just, whatever advice and questions they have, I always want people to make the decision on what they do with their money, because I find it gross when people are like demanding other people, you know, invest in X project, or, you know, I'm not saying you can't advocate for something, but, you know, there's a lot of like shilling going on right now, especially like Cardano and ADA, and just a lot of lies. Like Ethereum is one of, Frank Oth sent you some stuff about the DAO hack, but if you look at the DAO hack, essentially Ethereum, the biggest characteristic of blockchain that we're always told is that it's supposed to be immutable. Well, what Ethereum Foundation did is Ethereum Classic was a parallel timeline where this DAO hack had occurred, either had or hadn't occurred, is Ethereum Classic. But Ethereum that we have right now is the one where, Ethereum that we have right now is where the DAO hack was reversed and the people got their money back. Ethereum Classic was the other one. So they mutated their blockchain. So to me, that's kind of like they violated first principles.
That's the other problem with crypto, is we have to be rather activist or very awake. Finding out about changes of service is a biggie, really. Which one did you mention? I saw it.
Oh, also, just like after
Celsius.
I want to know, whenever you guys are done with this part of it, I just want to know about the environmental impact, because I know there's a lot of places starting to use alternative sources for that. But I know that that's something that a lot of, you know, comes up with people. They don't want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a talking point that they're saying now. They're like, oh, it's not good for the environment.
72%
Crypto.
or 82% of all crypto that was mined 1 year was like through a renewable source. There's incentives. The main thing with mining that I think really needs to be understood is that the environmental aspect. So I got my start mining Bitcoin. You were incentivized to use less power because your overhead, your cost was just power. So when I was in that, into doing that, I would always mod my I would modify my stuff so that I could get more power efficient. So the stuff that we were buying, you would get it and it would be like only halfway efficient, and then they would sell you a year later that same unit, but just with the efficiency mods, right? Like that's what I started noticing, so I started doing it my own. So again, the incentive is for the miner to not use a crap load of electricity. Now, the thing that I would say is that when you're looking at, because again, I agree, we need to look at the environmental impacts. The big thing that I look at is what backs fiat? Our military. What's the biggest polluter in the world? Military.
The MIC. Yep. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream right now. And for those of you who are watching, you guys want to join the Discord, we're gonna play some games here. I think Propaganda is gonna help me set that up. We're gonna play Jackbox. But other than that, this is what we do on Thursdays. I analyze the news, and then I have solutions talks with the audience members, which I think more channels should be doing. Because I mean, a lot of us already understand what the problems are. So yeah, take care, everybody. Thank you guys very much for watching, and stay informed.
Thank you, Franco.
Of course.
Franco.